All right, welcome to Can You Use a Mac Pro from 2006 and 2020, episode 3 or whatever. I apologize, it's been so long. It's now 2021, August of 2021. So yeah, I kind of got a little lazy filming. Anyhow, my apologies. We're back, and there's quite a story to tell. So before we even get started, again, I want to say sorry to those of you, probably like 2 of you, that were waiting to watch this video. I'm sorry, but there's some cool stuff out there for you if you stick around. This Mac Pro has been a royal pain in the ass. Because it has EFI 32 limitations and, you know, putting it together, I got the error codes from you saw in last episode. It was been really frustrating, so at some point I stopped messing with it for a little while and just kind of took a break. But here we are, and I'm ready to start the episode and explain to you what I've been up to. Quick thing before we start, I apologize if I look up. If I'm looking up, I'm looking to check my audio and if I'm in the frame and what I'm pointing at. So, because it's only me shooting, so I'm trying to check on everything. Now that we've done everything, we've installed all the parts, I'm going to go over it quickly and then we'll fire up the machine and have a look at stuff. So to start off the top of my head, I think the last clip I showed you guys was the whole computer assembled. I had put in the new Wi-Fi card and Bluetooth. I put in the USB 3 expansion card, and I don't think I had anything else there. I probably had all the drives in. They're a little different now. This drive is the El Capitan install, and this has the REFI and D bootloader. More about that in a little bit. The second drive that's not marked is a Windows 10 SSD. That was the SSD that originally came with this computer when we got it. I had to do some work. I'll discuss that later. And then 1 terabyte storage is just a 1 terabyte, 3.5-inch drive I had laying around. Popped it in there and I used that. I had got, I think, GTA 5 on there just to be stored when I was playing some games with this computer. Things you didn't see added were the first up would be the ATI Radeon. That's a 5770 that I put in. The reason because this card, which is the XT 1900 or the 1900 XT, whatever it is, this card suffers from heat. So if any of you are Apple people, you'll remember that in 2010, 2011, the Mac Pros had issues with thermals, and the GPUs, there was like a recall, like your logic board stuff. It was a big mess. I owned one of those MacBook Pros. I went through 4 or 5 logic boards. It was pretty bad. That's kind of what happened to this GPU. I think from testing and having 2 cards in, blowing the hot air right up to the bottom of it, it just started getting pixelated and messy and gross. And I didn't want to show you guys that from this video because this machine does work fine. It works okay, but the card itself doesn't. So I pulled that Radeon from another Mac Pro I have that you guys don't know about, that I've had since January when I released the last episode. And I may talk about that in the future. It's a Mac Pro 5,1. I've pretty much maxed it, and it's sitting across from me at my desk with my iMac for editing stuff. So if you guys are interested, leave a comment. I'll make a little video on that maybe. So there's that, and I use that card to show the boot screen, REFI and D, the boot manager, and then to show macOS. So that's what it does. There's a low profile GTX 1050 Ti right there from Zotac. I bought that on Craigslist for cheap before the GPUs really started going up in price. And then there's that USB 3 card I mentioned earlier. The cable you see running from here, let me see if that's in the frame, yeah. From here across is a Molex to whatever power for the card. I think it's SATA power, so Molex to whatever. It runs right there. You can shut the case with this, but you really have to force it closed. I mean, you could route the cable differently. You could try and route it through where the DVD drives are and pop out somewhere underneath the drives, but I just ran it like this for now. And the door is usually pressed upon it. It's in the corner right there. But the door is usually against it and it's fine. So those are the only real upgrades I made to this machine besides cleaning it up. I could max the RAM technically to 64 gigs, but looking at the price of it, it just didn't make sense to spend that much on an old machine. Before filming this video, I kind of prepped everything. And I did have some issues with the RAM. I was only getting 16 gigs out of 32 detected in Windows. I think that's just an issue with one of the lights. It comes on occasionally for the RAM saying there's an error, but there really isn't. So I've kind of reseated it, and hopefully it shouldn't give us any trouble. But that's kind of the layout here. One quick thing before we kind of dive in is there is 2 cables coming out. With DVI goes to this monitor, and that HDMI also goes to this monitor. But the HDMI is on a switch in the corner because I do use this monitor for other things. So it's on a like a HDMI switcher. I have the remote for the inputs, so I usually do that. So I'll note that if you guys see me pushing it, it's trying to convince this monitor to change its input to the correct one from the box. I have an extra drive tray in the corner, and this is for Lion. That would normally sit in the 4th slot, but I have some issues with that, so I'll mention that later. But we'll just leave that there for now. How did I get to all these steps, and how did I install these OSs? Well, I wrote this guide back in December of last year, December of 2020, and I haven't revisited this computer or this tutorial stuff since. So again, my apologies. It's like the 3rd time apologizing. I know I'm kind of slow and lazy. Need to work on that. But I wrote this guide on GitHub. I'll put it right here on the screen. And I wrote kind of every single step you need to do in order to get Windows 10 running nice and fluently on this machine, and I believe macOS El Capitan. So there's guides for that. It's perfect. It's great. I think you guys will like it. It's really simple to read. I'll just kind of give you a rough idea of what happened, things I've experienced, but please read this guide. It has all the info you need. If you're more technically inclined or advanced, this is a perfect guide for you. Even for beginners, you can follow bits and pieces of it. It's not too complicated. It's not very hard either. So it's perfect in those terms. And I really like the work I put into that guide. It is great. There's not a whole lot to be questioned about it. If you guys want to leave feedback on it, perfect. Do that in the comments, but if you want to submit changes for that, please do that through GitHub. It is a great guide I've put together, and it perfectly suits these machines for whoever wants to play with them. So there's the guide, and now let's talk about the struggles I went through to get this machine to do everything I wanted it to in order for the guide to be created. So where do I even start? Yeah, this machine was tricky, and that's partly due to the 32-bit EFI on this machine and dealing with the BIOS, the CSM, the compatibility, something module or whatever mode. It was just a royal pain. I mean, what are you gonna do? You can't change it, so you have to work around it. I played with a lot of stuff to get Windows installed, and that was kind of tricky. Windows does work great once it's done. There's a channel called Ridosko, and I reference him in my guide on GitHub for doing some of this install stuff. He has some great videos. I recommend you check out that series. It's good for these machines and some of the newer Mac stuff. That's a good place to go. I was just encountering stuff left and right. I mean, coming up for the Windows install method was tricky. I had to really kind of rack my brain for some ideas, ask some people, that I know, some questions with some of these more technical things, ways I could do it. But I eventually settled on a way by using this program called Rufus, which some of you may know for creating bootable flash drives. So I took the SSD out of here, and I have a SATA or SATA, however you say it, to USB adapter, and I hooked up my SSD as a USB drive, basically. And then I told Rufus to do a Windows to Go install on it. And there's a guy, if you see this, you'll know it's you. He told me, don't use Rufus, it's a mess, blah, blah, blah. But I think this works fine for the end user. I mean, I don't want everybody to jump through a bunch of hoops. If you're more technically inclined, there's plenty of ways to do a Windows install. You just have to figure it out. If you deal with Windows and like installing WIMs via command prompt and all that kind of stuff, it'll be a breeze for you. But that's kind of where I landed with Rufus. And it works good. You do the Windows to Go install, you pop the drive back in, you boot it, following the guide that I wrote, and it's perfect. You're on your way. And then I also wrote a portion of the guide dedicated to tuning Windows 10, also taking some inspiration from Ridosko and how to tune Windows. So follow that as well. It's well worth the extra speed boost on this machine. Every little bit you can get out helps, so that's pretty cool. Second project that I did was installing macOS 10.11 El Capitan. That was a little tricky because I couldn't get a legit copy of the installer of El Capitan through my Apple ID on a new Mac. I was just having trouble with it. So what I ended up doing was downloading it. I had the links in the guide, and then I used the Pikeify app to do an install, a clean install with this machine for El Capitan with all the necessary patches. Again, read the guide, it explains it perfectly. So that's a good way to do a clean install on a spare drive for the latest supported version on this Mac. I also did another method, which was, I think I called it method 1 in the guide, and that involved taking rutcape mods, the disk image file, and then, you know, somebody had already created the install for you, and so applying that to another drive. That's really simple. Anybody can do that. Piece of cake. He's got a video on it. You can follow that. But I just did the clean install way because I'm just me. I'm annoying to myself sometimes. So that's where we ended up. I wanted to find another way to do it, and I did. So there we go. A lot of hours making it try and work and, you know, piecing it together for the guide. But it's all good. It's all for benefit for somebody who has this or wants to play around with this machine. And then in the guide, I wrote a little extra links and resources tab. I recommend you check that out. There's a lot of cool stuff in there, and resources for Mac Pros and just kind of all the cheese grater style Mac Pros like these from 2006 to 2012 when the last one was dropped. So there's some little tidbits of info in there. I recommend you check it out if you're really interested and read up on that, because there's a lot of cool stuff that you can learn and just read if you were to play, you know, with this machine really in depth like I did. All right, and the last section I wrote on the guide was for the REFIND bootloader, refined or whatever. That's how people say it, I think. Doesn't matter. It's a boot manager. It's been around for a while. If you're familiar with tweaking, you know, Macs and doing some other OS installs, you probably remember this boot manager. Works great. There's a guide on how to install it. You copy and paste all the commands. I wrote them all out perfectly for you to get a bootable install going. And I'll preview a nice install for you guys here because I felt like that's a good way to show you guys, you know, you can use this boot manager to potentially, you know, run Linux or make it, you know, easier to do certain things. So that is also available as an option to, you know, work with this computer with. So that's kind of cool. So if you're interested in that, check out that guide or that portion of the guide. It was fun to put together. It wasn't all that challenging. It reminded me of OpenCore that I did on the 5.1 Mac Pro I have over here that I may mention, you know, in some newer videos if you guys are interested in that. So it was kind of fun to play around with that and pretty cool. Last thing I wanted to go over with this computer was I did put a GTX 1080 reference card in here, and obviously you can't do, you know, power for some of these bigger graphics cards, but there's a mod if you check out. It's called the Definitive Guide to Mac Pros by Greg something. Can't remember his name at the moment, but it's a fantastic guide. It's also linked in the resources thing. You can do that mod to support bigger graphics cards, but I'll talk about that a little later and why I don't really recommend that for this machine. I think you might understand why it makes sense with the age of it, but I'll talk about that later when we get into some examples of it kind of showing, you know, its true age. So okay, all right, now it's time to fire up the machine. Here's how we're gonna do this. We're gonna go through macOS first. I'm just gonna show you how everything's kind of set on the macOS side, and then we're gonna go ahead and boot into Windows and see how it goes. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna fire it up right now. We got no lights, thankfully. When I was filming this video earlier, I had some lights pop on and some trouble, but looks like we're good now. So that's kind of nice that it's quiet. Hopefully they don't pick up because that was my trouble. So here you go. This is REFIND, the boot manager, and I have it defaulted to Windows because this AMD card is not typically in this machine, or this ATI card. I'm just using it for Windows only, but to show you this menu, I need a card that is compatible on the Mac side, so that's why it's in there. So we're going to go ahead and boot macOS. macOS, like I said earlier, is on this drive. It's on a regular spinning 7,200 RPM drive. Nothing special. I don't have a spare SSD, and I figured the SSD was better utilized on the Windows drive where you can actually do more than on the macOS drive. Again, that depends on what your usage is for this machine. I know there's a lot of people that will still use these machines kind of modded the same way for video ingest of like DV tapes and stuff like that with older versions of Final Cut Pro or something. So I've seen that before, and some people have told me about, you know, this is why I use this. So that's kind of cool to see. So here we are. We're in macOS, it boots. Nothing major to see. I had the CUDA preferences here because I had a GTX 1080 in here just to play around with. So that's why you see that. You can see I got all my drives here available. I can go ahead and access my Windows drive. I don't think I can write any files to it, but I can read from it, which is nice. My storage, which is formatted as exFAT, so I can share between OSs if I'd like, and I've got my Epic games with my GTA 5 install on there as I've played on this computer a little bit just to see what it was like. Kind of notable things I have are the max fan control. It's a nice thing to be able to crank up the fans manually, and you can set a curve with this program. And if you check it out here, we'll show it. Go ahead, no thanks. You know, you can keep it cool and running nice, especially if you have two cards in there. You might cook the top card, which I think is what I did with that 1900 XT right here. So you can kind of watch your temps. That's a good thing with an old machine, you know, keep the airflow going and keep it on the colder side, especially if the fans are kind of showing, you know, wear, or it's just a dirty case and you can't clean it for the time being. Just crank up the fans a little bit. Let's see, let's go ahead and open the system information program or the app. So you can see it's the quad core, it's all upgraded, everything right there. We're going to go ahead and go to graphics and displays. So what I've done here, and what this Mac Pro has, is a program called Expansion Utility. And I only think it came with the 1,1 and the 2,1. Is you can set these PCIe slots, like how much bandwidth you want to give them. And so what I did when the utility came up is I gave the 1050 Ti the most bandwidth. I don't think it matters a whole lot after a certain point. And then I gave the ATI, the Radeon, I gave it, what does it say here? Lane width, X1. So very little bandwidth. You know, if you were using macOS, you would give it more bandwidth so you could do your programs here that are graphically intensive and require that performance. But I just gave it to the NVIDIA card because I'm only using Windows on this machine. For me, that's what makes sense, and that's what I'm trying to show you guys here today, is why you could still use this machine on Windows. So might as well give Windows, you know, as much power as it wants. And then the USB 3 card is also detected here in macOS, which I wasn't sure if it was going to be. And you can see USB 3 hub to blah, 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 via labs or whatever, but it detects it, so that's kind of nice. So I guess you can go ahead and use USB 3. You know, if that would be an upgrade for you, perfect. It'll work here. And you can also find cards that work with macOS as well. So that's kind of the whole install. There you go. I'll just show you, you know, the basic information tab here. Nothing fancy. Just got everything. So if you want to run macOS, this is the way to do it. All right, we're going to go ahead and restart the computer and boot into Windows so I can show you guys a few things. We'll go over those now. Windows mainly being Premiere Pro, because I do a lot of editing in Premiere Pro, so I'm going to show an example of a massive project I've edited on another machine. It's all done, but I want to show you guys kind of the performance and, you know, what might be viable in Windows to do for you. So essentially, if you wanted to edit with this computer, you could do some light stuff. Just throw some extra drives in for storage and you're golden. So here you go, the light has just come on for one of the RAM sticks. and I think the fans are ramping up, so I'm going to apologize in advance if the audio goes really loud with fans. It's not a whole lot I can do. I get this issue sometimes. I think one of the RAM sticks is the problem, but I can't figure out. I'm just not going to mess with it. It's fine. So Windows in REFI and D, always select the blue one. The other ones use the REFI, like the boot assist stuff. So yeah, blue one works good. That's what I use. Now the tricky part is if you boot this computer with 2 graphics cards, you're going to face an issue occasionally where it's going to try and push everything onto the ATI card or the NVIDIA card I have here. It'll be one or the other, or it'll say it'll act as dual monitors, but one display will be on one card and one display will be on the other card. Now normally I don't have this issue because this card isn't in there and the boot manager knows to boot Windows automatically, so I don't face that problem. But you may face that occasionally if you boot with 2 cards in. Just something to know. I'm just going to go ahead and cycle through the inputs because sometimes the monitor doesn't do a very good job of switching on its own. This is just a basic Acer monitor I have, just laying around. It doesn't do a great job of switching in between, but like I said, when I only have one graphics card hooked up, not a problem. And it's also just the monitor being a pain. There we go, into Windows. That's because I was on the wrong HDMI. Go ahead here and let's go through some of the basics quickly of the install. And as you can see, it's kind of quickish. I mean, Windows has its faults. So I have this is the Radeon, it's disabled, and everything is running on the GTX 1050 Ti. And just to prove that, we'll go ahead to advanced display settings. There you go, 1050 Ti. Super awesome. And yeah, before we continue, I need to change batteries on this camera, and I'll be back because it's about to die. All right, sorry about that. We're back now. The camera is just going to die, and I was going to lose all this footage, which is kind of important because you guys need to see. So I was talking about our display earlier. That's all there, running on the 1050. So let's go to About. So there you go. You can see the Xeon processors is all there. 28 gigs of RAM, I presume, because that light is telling me that one of the RAM sticks is acting up. Not a whole lot we can do about it right now. We're just in the middle of this, and it doesn't really matter, to be honest. Normally, it detects all 8 slots, so it's not like this is a Windows issue. It will detect 32 just fine, so I'm not worried about that. Doesn't matter. All right, go ahead and shut that. I think you guys kind of get the point. It's running Windows pretty good. And let's go ahead and do a Premiere test now. Now, the project I'm going to open, I'll admit, is overkill for this computer by a lot. This project includes a multi-camera sequence with 4 cameras, 3 of them being 4K footage, with one of the cameras having some ProRes footage and the other 2 some H.264, some compressed footage to deal with. And we'll just kind of see, how this computer can take it. Now, before we do that, I will mention, because this computer is getting very old at this point in terms of, how far we've advanced since one of these has shown up, it's getting old to the point where you can't even run some of the modern applications inside of Windows anymore. And I'm going to show you an example of that inside of Creative Cloud. So Creative Cloud here is just loading, but what I want to show you is very important because this might disappoint some of you. We're going to go ahead, when it loads, go to the Apps section, and I have only Premiere and Media Encoder installed here. Okay, here we go. So there you go. Photoshop 22.2 is available to install, but 22.5 is not available because it's not compatible with the system. And why? You need SSE 4.2 or later. Now that's becoming a more required instruction set for programs and OSs and stuff like that. So, with Windows 11 coming out soon, you need to have, whatever hardware. This is not going to make that cut. So, programs are just, that's what you're going to see now. but it's nice to see that older versions, fairly modern versions, will still do it too. And these Premiere updates just came about today. Doesn't matter, we're gonna ignore those because they just happened today in the process of this. So we're gonna take my SanDisk, there it is. It's a 1 terabyte external drive. Unfortunately, I didn't buy a USB-C card to hook it up directly, but you know, USB 3 will work good. So we'll just go ahead and plug that in here. One of the slots. There we go, hooked in. All right, we'll go ahead and just open Premiere first because of the vast size of this project, and I'll bring up the task manager again just to show you what kind of dent in performance this is gonna make. So we'll let Premiere load, and then I'll go ahead and open up the project. So here you go, I'll put the task manager next to this project opening. Now, I'll admit this isn't the first time I've opened it on this computer, but as you'll see, it's gonna put some toll on the hardware and use quite a bit of usage. So we're just looking at RAM right now. Let's look at the CPU, 90% at that one peak right there. We'll push OK. And yeah, it's just reading off stuff. No problem reading off my SanDisk. No problem reading off my SSD. That's in the computer, so that's good. But as you can see, it's using a lot of resources. I mean, this is some heavy footage. Even newer computers will, you know, choke on some of this stuff. And it's using, you know, as much RAM as it wants. So it's loading. We got media pending. This is a common thing in Premiere that I wait around for quite a lot. So once it pens, we'll go ahead and take a look at our footage, because then it'll load in and be ready to go. All right, like I said earlier, this is a big project. This sequence specifically is 2 hours and 59 minutes of 4K footage, minus the 1080p camera, doesn't matter. It's all color graded too, so that's even an extra strain on a computer like this. So I think, let's see what our playback options are. 1/8, and that's just for a single camera view. But let's go ahead and bring up multi-camera. Think of this as like kind of the more hardcore editing. Like this would be a pain, you know, on an old computer. So let's go ahead and look at our usage here. So we're kind of idling down a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and mute this so we don't have to hear it. I'm gonna go ahead and see. Let's see. Now we can change it to 1/16 of, you know, really low quality. No proxies, no anything like that. Let's just leave it at 1/8. Let's go ahead and hit play on this multi-camera. And let's go ahead and pull up the task manager and let's see what we're dealing with here. So we're looking at, you know, higher CPU usage, above half. The GPU just touched 100 right there. I think that was due to changing cameras, but it's, you know, consistent 60 or so %, 100 again. And that's kind of what we're looking at for, you know, all these camera angles and stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and pause it. We're gonna scrub the timeline and see if I mean, it's trying. It's not like a smooth scrubbing experience, but it's not the worst I've seen, believe it or not. So that's not shabby, but it's not great at the same time. So let's go ahead and change the quality to 1/4 quality. So I'm gonna hit play on that, pull up the task manager, and I don't see any frame, oh, there's a few frames dropping. Yeah, so 1/4, you know, 1/4 of the quality is really pushing your luck, and the CPU usage is high, 80%. The GPU has backed off a little bit, I think, just due to the sole camera angle we're on. It's staying consistent, so I guess it depends. But, you know, that's a sequence that's heavily color, like, you know, color corrected, all that. Not even rendered previews, nothing. So that's not terrible. I mean, it's not the greatest. We'll just slide forward to something here. Let's see. There we go. We're at this angle now. And I'm gonna go ahead and just crank the quality up to half. Let's see. Open Task Manager. Just by eye, I could see maybe there was a couple frame drops. Nothing crazy. So that's not bad. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so let's even try full quality really quick. Full quality. Oh yeah, and now it's starting to stutter. But if we look at the usage, you know, 100%, it's all 8 cores are maxed. So you're not getting away with 100% probably graded footage. That's ProRes or whatever, but it's not bad. I mean, it's usable. The Premiere, if you go into preferences, let's go do this quickly, media, it'll pop up. It supports the encoding of, you know, hardware encoding for H.264 and HEVC for NVIDIA and AMD for your card, so that's cool. So sweet, Premiere works all right. That's not bad. I mean, it's not great. So that's kind of what we're looking at for Premiere. So if you want to do some light video editing, not bad. It'll take some of the punishment, not all of it, but some. I mean, like I said, it wouldn't be a great day-to-day machine. Your export times for videos are going to be ridiculously long if you want quality, not the quick, fast encoded stuff. You're not going to reap any benefits from using a machine that's this old, but you could get away with it, which is not bad, but who knows for how much longer. I mean, I haven't tested any other editors like DaVinci, but you know, that's just kind of a heavy workload that I could throw at it. That's kind of quick to show what it could do. As for games, I mean, I had, like I said earlier, I have GTA 5 on here. It runs all right. I would say 40, 50 FPS with some little tweaks on some lower settings. In offline and online mode, you know, 30 to 40, nothing spectacular. The card will do a lot better than that, but it's really a bottleneck, I think, of the CPU that's holding everything back, and the RAM, you know, speed and stuff like that. So, you know, it's just old components holding back newer tech. Yeah, that's it. I mean, it'll play videos. Let's go ahead and pull up some videos. Let's see if we can get anything here. Let's do YouTube. I think I searched up when I was doing some testing. We did 8K in Peru. So let's see. Let's go ahead and pop this on. Oh, of course, we've got an ad. Not surprising. So, I mean, there's not much you need to see here. It's playing ads. It's fine. It's not going to sweat over stuff like this. So here we go. 4K, 60 FPS, stats for nerds up. We dropped 5 frames. I think that was in the beginning. It looks very fluid right now. No, you know, no issues. We'll go ahead and go out of there and see what our usage is. Yeah, it's capable of doing that. No problem. Let's just see if we can find some 8K just video. Maybe this will do it. Oh yeah, there we go, 8K. So I'm gonna pause and just let that kind of buffer a little bit. I mean, this is 8K on a 1080p monitor. So we've dropped 14 frames at the beginning, but now we're consistent. Also, this is 60 FPS footage. So yeah, I mean, obviously I can't see 4K, and moving the mouse there kind of caused the frames to drop, but I mean, come on, that's not bad. That's pretty good. Go ahead and just look at our usage. I mean, it's clear the graphics card is sweating hard now at 96%, 95% usage, and we've dropped a couple more frames since. But hey, I mean, you can watch, it's not bad. Come on. You still can go on the web. You can still do all this stuff with this computer. It's not terrible. It'll still do stuff. The cons are it's just going to get very hot, which it does, and it's going to use a lot of electricity because it's inefficient. So, but it'll do it. So there you go. I'm going to go ahead and just shut this down. I don't think we need to see anything more with it. There's nothing, you know, really much to say besides if you have one of these, you know, go ahead, throw a little bit of money at it. I threw, I think, 150 bucks at this machine, and you know, I've just showed you what it does. Not great, but not terrible, but it's getting close to terrible. So maybe not, you know, maybe not something worth playing around with anymore. I haven't tried Linux on it. I'm sure you can try Linux if you'd like, if somebody wants to, or if I get enough comments before I sell this machine, you know, then yeah, we'll do maybe Linux on it or something, just for fun. But yeah, there you go. 2006 Mac Pro in 2021. Not terrible. It works. I mean, we were just able to, you know, we could do some editing with it. It wouldn't be fluid. It wouldn't be like, you know, super quick or whatever, but you could still get the job done if you had to. If this was like absolute, you know, the only machine you had, you could get away with it. And it's been a fun process to play with it. I bought it a year ago now, I think just over a year ago. I picked it up and, you know, finally filming this, you know, episode 3, which is kind of pathetic on my part, but I just needed to film it, that's all. But like I said, it's been fun. If you have one of these, you know, laying around, sure, do it. If you're thinking about buying one of these just to play around with, not worth it. Just, you know, find some other tech you have interest in. I've already done, you know, what you wanted to see with it. It's not worth, you know, buying and throwing money at it unless you get it for free or something like that. There's plenty of other things you can spend, you know, your money on. So while it's fun, it's just a hobby. It's not a daily driver. It could be if you needed it to be for web stuff, but, you know, cons: heats up, old hardware, and it can get really loud when when the fans kick on. So there it is. If anybody's interested in buying a 2006 Mac Pro that's been upgraded, there you go. Hit me in the comments. But, you know, it's been fun. It's another one of my fun projects. But to sum it up, you know, read the guide. I spent a lot of time on the guide prepping it for this machine. I think it's cool. And I try to make that work, you know, for people who are interested. You know, a little guide. Here's what you do, you know, save yourself some time. So there's that. And then just kind of learning, you know, Apple quirks. And it's just too, it's like my brain, I always want to find the solution to something. And so that's what I ended up doing. I found, you know, quite a few solutions to keep this old machine going, and here we are. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. I know this is a longer video, but I tried my best to explain everything, and hopefully those timestamps and the chapter markers or whatever helped as well. If you'd like to see more of this stuff, let me know. I have a few things I've been working on. I got maybe a couple things I'd like to document. I just did a battery swap on a laptop that doesn't commonly get, you know, this kind of battery upgrade, so maybe I'll do a video on that. Just a quick little note. I did a Hackintosh Surface Pro 3 recently for fun, just to learn OpenCore and whatever, so I did that. I could do a video on that. Or I could do a video on that Mac Pro I said I picked up. Oh, I said that when I tried to film this earlier. I picked up a 5.1 Mac Pro 2010 in January for $100 off of a guy on Reddit. Met him, bought it, and now yeah, I have a 1080 Ti in there, and it's a fun little machine. I've done some mods to it, and it does some editing too. So that's around if you want me to make a video on that. But for a fun project, if you got it, do it. If not, don't do it. Don't waste your time like me. It's not a waste. I learned stuff, but hey, you know what I mean. So thank you very much for watching, and hopefully see you soon.